Not much changes as you get older. The best way to get me to do something is to offer me a snack. Okay. All right. Well, come on in. Casey, will you mind closing those doors back there after folks are out? And we will continue with our study of money from the book of Proverbs, which we'll get into in just a moment. But Parson Ed, would you pray for us to open our time?
Lord, we humble ourselves and bless your holy name. And we ask, Father, for wisdom and the Holy Spirit as we carve out life and ministry. And now as we tackle the issue of money, help us to be wise handlers, wise stewards of the resources that you bless us with. Help us understand it better. In the name of Jesus.
Thank you very much. So Ed led us in a discussion last week about money. Proverbs has a lot to say about money. It speaks as much about money as probably any other topic. And we talked about how money can enslave us. We can become enslaved to our money. Money can make us do crazy things. And I want to talk a little bit about money, but from a different angle this morning. We're going to look at two Proverbs in particular. But before we do, I want to start by telling you about the most depressing website on the internet I've ever found. And now I don't mean the most vile, I don't mean the most objectionable, I don't mean the most wicked or detestable. I mean just literally the most sad I've ever been looking at a website. And I'm sure there are sadder websites, although I don't care to find them. It's a website called Cameo.com. Has anyone ever heard of this? Cameo.com? Cameo.com is a website where you can pay B-list and C-list and faded A-list actors and celebrities and athletes to record videos and send them to you or to your friends. So, I don't know, say your friend is a real big fan of Murder, She Wrote. You could get Angela Lansbury to record a 5-minute birthday message and send it to your friend. And I was trying to think about the most depressing figures I could find on there, and here's just a few that I found. For $200, just $200, you could have Dee Snider of Twisted Sister record a video for you or for one of your friends, which is pretty good, I thought. Yeah. Does anybody know the name Chris Kirkpatrick? He was the least handsome and least talented member of NSYNC. Do you remember that band? Justin Timberlake, wildly popular boy band. Chris Kirkpatrick will record a video for you for $129. Kenny G will only charge you $295. Joel Hoekstra, does anybody know that name? Joel Hoekstra, guitarist of Whitesnake, $24. Things are not going so well for Joel. Larry Thomas, better known as the Soup Nazi from Seinfeld, $80. Kevin Sorbo, Hercules, $80. Here's where we get into some really depressing territory. Jose Canseco, you guys remember him? $100. Do you know how much Jose Canseco made in his career? Can you tell me? Any guesses? $200? Yeah. Oh, that's a good guess. Yeah, he made about $90 million before endorsements. That was just salary. Greg Oden, does anybody know that name? He was a basketball player, the number 1 overall pick. He got hurt in a year into his career, never played again. He'll record a video for $50. He made $25 million in two years in the NBA without endorsements. Brett Favre will record a video for $400. He made $166 million just in salary, no endorsements. Allen Iverson, I saw on Cameo, but I also saw that Allen Iverson who used to play for the Nuggets for a time, very famous basketball player. Allen Iverson will come to your birthday party for $500. So anyone got a birthday coming up? That's not a bad idea. I know yours just passed, maybe next year. $500. Allen Iverson made over $300 million, including endorsements. Allen Iverson has no money now. He just declared bankruptcy a couple years ago. I literally don't know how you would spend $300 million. What's the most expensive house you can buy? Was it like $100 million? I don't know. Some of you will remember Adam Pac-Man Jones. He played mostly for the Cincinnati Bengals, but he also had an unsuccessful stint for the Broncos. I read an interview with him where he went to Vegas for a weekend. He was there for 48 hours, and he spent $1 million with no assets to show after the trip. All right.
How much would we charge?
Yeah. How much would you charge for a cameo birthday video? 7 or 8?
I'll let you.
Yeah. So here's what I want to ask you. Why are these celebrities, and here we're using the term celebrity very loosely at this stage, why are these celebrities willing to spend their time and effort to get a cut of even $400? Because the website takes about half of it, I'm sure. Right? How is it worth it to Jose Canseco to make $200 recording a video? What is the moral of this story? So you might think $300 million is more than you could spend in a lifetime. But as I just mentioned, Iverson is now broke. I was reading, actually, right now, in fact, he has a negative net worth. Right? So, I don't know, the barista who made your coffee at Starbucks is in a much better financial situation than Allen Iverson. And he's been out of basketball for only 8 years. That fortune is gone. And here's one of the morals of the story, but not the main one we're going to talk about today, is that even vast sums of money won't last forever. Right? Here's another moral. Wealth is unpredictable because life is unpredictable. Right? Some of these folks who ended up on Cameo fell on hard times. Jose Canseco, for instance, lost a lot of his estate in a divorce and in a series of failed businesses. A lot of these athletes do. They all start restaurants after they get out and lose all their money, or they start a string of car washes or something. Or they get divorced, or a lot of them, this happened to Tim Duncan, this happened to Kevin Garnett, had personal financial advisors who stole tens of millions of dollars from them. So these sorts of things happen. You can never just assume that the good times will roll on forever. Are there any other lessons we can take from cameo.com before we start looking at the Proverbs?
Well, I don't know if you're going to deal with this one, but I read every day's proverb, and it's funny you bring this up with providential, because yesterday said in Proverbs 13, wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it. So when you get a windfall, typically you behave like a fool, and those guys all did, one way or another. That's why lottery winners are often broke.
Yep.
A couple of years later.
Yeah, so Ed makes the point, if you're listening at home, that when you get a windfall, you often act like a fool, right? You don't do sensible things. Joel Hoekstra of Whitesnake is not getting $24 for a video because he put his money in a modest 401k that's giving a 4.5% return, okay? Yeah, Jesse.
My dad and I were having a conversation one day about, wanting to retire, and he had a bunch of money to retire, and I said, Dad, I need to win the lottery. He said, Jesse, you know the surest way to get rich? And I said, yeah, win the lottery. He said, no, work hard every day.
Oh, someone's been reading Proverbs. Yeah, so Jessie makes the point. She was talking with her dad about wanting to retire, and she says, I need to win the lottery. And her dad says, what's the best way to get rich? And she says, win the lottery. And he goes, nope, work hard every day. Yeah, Andy.
I was going to say, PBS had done a series on those who won the state lottery.
Yeah.
And years later,
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, so Andy says that PBS recently ran a documentary about lotto winners, state lotto winners, whose lives are all in tatters now, whether it's divorce or bankruptcy, what have you. So here's the thing. I think it's really easy to look at these celebrities and shake your head, right? I often think about that. I could take one of, I don't know, Von Miller's game checks and pay off my house and also retire. I could do both of those things with one game check, right? And you think, well, how is this, what's going on here? Well, the thing is, Proverbs has a lot to say about money. And we're going to start with one of its most basic lessons about money that even though we're not celebrities, we need to learn. That fortune is fickle. And that's especially when it comes in the form of a windfall. So Pastor Ed did, in fact, steal our thunder. We're going to look at first at Proverbs chapter 13, verse 11. I'm going to read it in the English Standard Version, and then I'm going to give you, like we have been doing, Eugene Peterson's translation, which I think is really good. Listen to what Solomon says. Wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it. Let me read it again. Wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers little by little will increase it. Here's how Eugene Peterson translates it in the Message. Easy come, easy go, but steady diligence pays off. All right. Let's try to understand what Solomon is saying here. If we look at this proverb, let's establish what the problem is not first.
Well, the problem is not accumulating money.
Yeah, Solomon, as Ed says, doesn't necessarily see a problem with accumulating money. Wealth is not the problem, at least in this proverb. I do think the Bible is ambivalent towards wealth. I think Jesus in particular thinks that you should count yourself fortunate that you're not fabulously wealthy. But for our purposes here, Solomon, he doesn't say don't accumulate wealth. He's more concerned with why and how we accumulate it. And in this passage, he's talking primarily about the how. So here's the question. What's interesting is the Hebrew idiom used here, wealth gained hastily. It literally means in Hebrew, money out of thin air, right? So money out of thin air will dwindle, but steady diligence will pay off. So why does Solomon think, I'm asking the why question here, why does Solomon think that wealth gained quickly is more likely to run out than wealth gained slowly over time? Why do you think that is? Yeah, Jesse. Yep. Okay, really good. So Jesse says when you accumulate your money over time, it really forces you to think about how you're going to spend it, because you've worked a long time to get it, right? Why else does Solomon think it's better to go this way?
Well, you understand, if it takes you time, you understand how difficult it is sometimes to accumulate money because life is so unpredictable and it can be so difficult. None of us here lived, except Sam, lived through the Depression. All my uncles and aunts did it. They had, I think, much, much greater appreciation for saving and money than any generation since then.
Yeah.
Because they knew, my mother waited on bread lines.
Yeah.
To get food.
Yeah. Yeah, so Ed makes the point, when you work hard for your money over a long period of time, you have a sense of its value, especially if you've had to work really hard for it. He illustrated by talking about people in the Depression who had to wait in bread lines and had to actually save everything they had just to survive. Yeah, you don't appreciate the value of money when you don't work a long time for it. Some of you will know Bill and Penny Van Horn. I worked for Bill and Penny for a long time and got to know Bill well. And Bill, before he started his own family law practice, Bill, if you're watching at home, I'm stealing your story. It's a really good story. Bill, his first wife died when his kids were young. They were in elementary school. He had 3 elementary school boys. And he was working for the Department of Justice as a lawyer, but he was also flying in the Air Force Reserve. And he would get $100 per mission to fly with the Air Force Reserve. So he would get off his job on a Friday night at the Department of Justice, working late. He would drive to Colorado Springs, where he was stationed. He would change into his jumpsuit. He would fly B-52 bombers all night and into the next day. He would come back, change back into his business clothes, go straight back to his office on Monday morning. And he said, over time, he came to ask himself, when it was time to buy something, and it cost, say, $400, he would say, is that thing worth me doing that 4 times? And usually the answer was no, right? You get a sense of value for your money when you work hard over it. Why else? I think there's a couple more reasons. I think one, if you don't grow your money gradually over time, you also don't grow the skills that it takes to manage your money once you have it. I think this is part of what Solomon's after. To be wise with your money for Solomon and for any of us requires discipline, certain habits. It requires a certain character that if you just get your money all at once, you don't actually build the skills over time, which is why, I don't know, Adam Pac-Man Jones spends $1 million in a weekend with nothing to show for it. No skills to go with it. Another example is we've got a cultural trope. We've got a character in our culture known as the fail son. The fail son. This is a short term for someone who inherits a family business and then runs it into the ground. We got a lot of examples of this in sports. James Dolan is the owner of the Knicks. His father is the patriarch of the Comcast cable empire. James Dolan was born into the lap of luxury, and he got the Knicks in the same way that I might get a toy train when I turned 8. Right? Look, it's all yours. You can do what you want with it. Well, when you've got a sports franchise that's worth $2 billion, there's a lot more at stake. And James Dolan ran the Knicks into the ground because he never learned how to do it. Another good example is Mark Davis, the owner of the Raiders, who inherited the team from his father, Al Davis. But in our case, this is actually a good thing, and he should keep doing what he's doing. Another reason, I think, is because when you get a windfall rather than a steady accumulation, you lose all sense of proportion. Right? You win the Powerball, and suddenly those are numbers showing up in your bank account that you can't even imagine them. Right? Like, think of your bank account and add 3 or 4 zeros. Right? Pretty wild. And you lose sense of proportion. You know, you used to have to budget to go out to dinner, right? Or you used to have to put aside money for Christmas presents throughout the year so that you could buy them at the end of the year. And now, you don't need to exercise any kind of restraint at all, at least not for a while. So here's the takeaway, I think. Slow and steady beats get rich quick, but why? Well, I think for Solomon, it's really not about the money at all. It's about becoming a certain kind of person. It's about cultivating virtues like hard work and diligence and self-restraint, delayed gratification, right? Simplicity, stability, contentment. Solomon's telling us that the way we earn our money shapes our character. Right? So it's not just neutral. Right? You don't just make money any way you can. How you make money matters because it's making you into a kind of person. So the question is, what kind of person do you want to be? That brings us to a second proverb here. If you're tuning along, we're going to go to Proverbs chapter 23, verses 4 and 5, where Solomon gives us another word picture here. Do not toil to acquire wealth. Be discerning enough to resist it. For when your eyes light upon it, it is gone. For suddenly it sprouts wings, flying like an eagle toward heaven. Let me read it again. Do not toil to acquire wealth. Be discerning enough to resist it. For when your eyes light upon it, it's gone. For suddenly it sprouts wings, flying like an eagle toward heaven. Here's the message. Don't wear yourself out trying to get rich. Restrain yourself. Riches disappear in the blink of an eye. Wealth sprouts wings and flies off into the wild blue yonder. A lot of those characters we met at the beginning of our time learned that lesson the hard way. But we also are in danger, I think, here. So, one of the big points of the book of Proverbs is that you should work hard. We've talked about that a little bit. Diligence is a key virtue in the book of Proverbs. So we should work hard, Solomon says, but he seems to be talking out of both sides of his mouth, right? He's also clear we shouldn't work too hard, right? Don't run yourself ragged chasing after money, he says. Well, why not? How would you answer that? Why not? Anyone have experience doing this? Running yourself ragged in your career? Why is this a bad idea? Say again, Bert? It wears you out. Right? You used to work 16 hours a day every day. What was that like? Yeah? Wore you out, right? Ages you before your time, I think I hear you saying. Yeah? So yeah, don't wear yourself out. It can destroy our health. Can really take a toll on our families, on our relationships. You were going to say something here, Parson.
Just that when you excessively pursue work and accumulation of wealth, it is impossible that you don't sacrifice the more important things in life, like worship. Like, where is Bill? Well, or where is Tim? Or where is Sally? Well, they're working on Sunday. They're working 2 jobs because they want to buy a new house. So they're never in worship. What we're doing is working. So they're too tired on Sunday. Like Bert said, you're working 16 hours a day, so I have to sleep on Sunday so I don't go to worship. And obviously, you cannot invest in your family or in your health when you're looking at the hours.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
Yeah. So Ed makes the point, it's impossible, if you run yourself ragged chasing after wealth, to invest in other things that matter more. It's just a simple equation. There's not enough time, right? So no matter what our culture tells us, we can't have it all, right? We have to make some choices. Now, again, we just saw Solomon doesn't think there's anything wrong with working hard every day to provide for your family, even to store up some money for the future. He doesn't think that's the problem. Don't run yourself ragged. Why else? Why else is that a bad idea? He tells us a couple reasons right here in this proverb.
But what you accumulate could be gone in a second.
Yep.
Back in 2008, when everything crashed, people, with 401ks lost up to half their investment. So those people had worked relentlessly with sacrifice.
Yeah.
The most important thing, half their money was gone
Yeah.
overnight.
Yeah. Yeah, so Ed makes the point about the financial crisis in 2008, where lots of people lost their retirement overnight. Even more harrowing, I don't know how well you remember this, but in 2008, you had Wall Street bankers and hedge fund managers killing themselves because they lost a bunch of money suddenly, right? Like an eagle, it sprouts wings and it flies away. Riches don't ultimately last, even if we're sensible with them. Right? This is one of the big takeaways of the entire biblical tradition. When you die, Solomon says in Ecclesiastes, what happens to everything you've accumulated? You don't get to take it. He says it goes to someone else, and he says that person might be wise or they might be a fool. Right? So you can't control it. Riches don't supply us with the things that matter most. This is another trope. Everybody says this. Money can't buy happiness. There's a stand-up comic named Dimitri Martin. Does anybody know that name? He's a pretty funny guy, and he has a bit on this. He says that they say that money can't buy happiness. He says that's true, but money can buy a jet ski, and I've never seen someone frowning on a jet ski, which is pretty good. But you know what he means, right? It can buy you a jet ski. But at the end of the day, what difference does a jet ski really make? All right? If you're not finding your fulfillment in other things. You can't trust money, Solomon says, because there's no telling when you'll have it or when you won't. It's here one minute, gone the next. Here's the point. The wisdom literature is trying to get us to understand this generally, and money is just one way to apply this. We are not in control of our lives. All right? For the biblical writers, to be a creature means to be subject to all kinds of forces beyond your control. Now, to be sure, we trust in God for his provision for us, and he will take care of his people. But you may lose your job. Your company may downsize. They may move their headquarters, and you've got an option of staying in your job or moving somewhere else. The economy might crash. There might be an animal in an open air market in China that means that you're out of a job 3 months later. This just happened. It literally just happened. We're living right through it. You can't act like you can control your life circumstances. And this is, in fact, reflected in the way that we talk about money. We talked a couple weeks ago about the metaphors that we live by. We talked about metaphors for speech, blowing smoke, a bunch of hot air. Here's another metaphor we use for money. He made a fortune doing X, Y, or Z. Isn't that interesting? Ever thought about that image? Do you know where we get the word fortune? From the Latin word fortuna. It means luck or chance. Like a fortune teller. All right? The word that we use for a vast sum of money literally is the word luck. Chance. Here's the point. Solomon makes this point in Ecclesiastes. He says the race is not always to the swift. What does that mean? The race is not always to the swift. It's a little riddle. Solomon's always speaking in riddles. What does it mean? Yeah. Yep, the fable of the tortoise and the hare is making the same point, right? The hare jumps out to an early lead, gets cocky, and the tortoise, slow and steady, wins the race. What else?
It means there's a lot of factors that are out of your control. You can be really fast on the track, but you could pull a hamstring, you could trip, and if somebody's not as fast as you get surprised.
Yep.
Because they run, a moderate race. Just because you're fast doesn't mean you win all the time.
Yeah, so it makes the point. There's a lot you can't control. Just because you're fast doesn't mean you're always going to win the race. You could pull a hamstring. You could trip. You could get out to too fast to start. This happens in the Olympics sometimes, especially in these distance events, right? The favorite maybe gets out too far. They push themselves a little too hard, and then they get surprised by someone who was hanging back in the pack. The race isn't always to the swift. Lots of dumb people make a ton of money. Lots of smart people never make anything. Fortune, right? I went to grad school with a guy whose family was set for life because his grandfather invented the plastic piece on an ignition that makes your key easy to turn. That's random, isn't it? But his family was set for life. They would never want for anything, generations into the future. Every car that's made anywhere has that thing. Think about what kind of fortune that is. I knew another guy whose family had a fortune because they supply all of the linoleum baseboards for every Walmart in the world. How'd you like to get that contract? Maybe that guy doesn't make that ignition piece. Maybe that never happens, right? Maybe he doesn't get a fortune. Maybe somebody else gets that contract for Walmart, right? So sure, they worked hard. They were inventive. They were smart guys, obviously. But it could have gone another way. This is what Solomon's trying to tell us. There are brilliant businesses mind that fail. There are ideas that never take off. There are people who work really, really hard their whole lives and never quite make it. That's why you can't throw your full weight onto running yourself ragged to get riches. That's the thing. You can't trust your fortune. The word itself means luck. You can work hard. He's just told us. You can exercise diligence. You can practice foresight. But you can't secure your own life. You can't secure your future. Only God can do that, Solomon says. So do what is prudent, but don't wear yourself out chasing a fortune, he says. So both of these proverbs, in their different ways, are encouraging us to exercise restraint when it comes to our money. So here's a couple questions I want to think about Two I'll just give you for reflection, and then the third we'll talk about together. Where are a couple of places where you're spending money that you probably shouldn't be? Everybody's got something like this, right? Or where you can cut back, exercise some restraint, some diligence. Second question for reflection. Solomon recommends slow and steady over get rich quick. Where's an area in your financial life where you can play the long game, where you can choose to delay your gratification in the short term with an eye towards the future? Right? Where can we play the long game? And here's a question I want to think about together. Solomon warns us not to obsess over money because we ultimately can't control our fortunes anyway. What are some practical ways that we can slowly learn not to trust our money for our security? Can we think of some actual things we can do? Actual practices? Giving our money away is one of the big ones. Yep. This seems to be the Jesus way, right? You don't want to serve your money, make your money serve you. And that often means separating yourself from it. Not all of it, and not all the time. But yeah, giving your money away is a good one. What else?
Well, when the Lord says where your heart is, there your money is also.
Yeah,
What is important to you?
yeah.
And what, a lesson we learned long ago was that when we talked last week about tithing, 9/10 goes farther than 10/10 ever thought of.
Yeah,
What you do is try it once or twice and then you realize what's falling apart. But what do you really think about? What is important? That's where you can control where your money goes.
Yeah, so Lee has made the point that your money is a really good index of what you treasure most. And that can make it really nerve-wracking, say, to give your money away, like we just talked about. But that sounds like old-timey Baptist wisdom, 9/10 goes further than 10/10. That's probably where that came from, but yeah, that's right. God's economics don't work in the same way that ours do, but it takes a lot. It's scary. Yeah, so that's really helpful. What else can we do? These are not radical, but they are radical for our cultural context. How about this one? Live within or even below your means. There's an idea no one's trying in America, right? I have a good friend who's a real estate agent. And he's doing something really cool. He's a believer. He runs a real estate team here in Littleton. And he has developed, it's probably been a long time since you've looked for real estate. But if you go onto Zillow or something, you can search and you can check boxes for what you're looking for, right? And then it will tell you houses that are kind of in your range and whatever. He created a search engine like that, but with plugins for your church community, your friendships, and other things that matter matter to you. So it's actually a function of his real estate team's search site that I'm looking for a house, but it's important to me to live close to my community, say. He says there's not an option for this in the real estate world. He says in the real estate world, people are looking for the absolute biggest house they can afford. All they want is square footage. Doesn't matter how far away it is. Doesn't matter how much it's going to cost them, right? What if Jesus' people lived within or below their means, right? This is a discipline that the ancients called simplicity. We're going to talk about it later this year in our sermon series, but simplicity, right? You don't need to buy the biggest or best thing you can afford, right? Don't buy things you don't need. That's hard because we don't need that much. Repair the things you have rather than buy a new one. Now, this is me. Theoretically, I think that's probably possible. I don't know how to do that. You guys probably know how to do that. But here's another one. Use what you have before you buy anything new. Adrian and I instituted a rule. I wish this were not the case, but I've got a pathology around books. I I buy books with every intention of reading them, even if I know it's not going to be for another 10 years. Well, that's dumb. Adrian made me make a rule that I have to read 3 books that I own before I can buy one new book. I don't always do that well, and I don't always tell her, but I try to abide by the spirit of it, right? This is why we get married. Yeah, that's right. Those are simple things, but radically countercultural, right? There was a book that came out a few years ago. It was a New York Times bestseller, The Secret. You remember this book? And it was supposed to be the secret to, like, it was a spiritual secret. It was on Oprah's book club. You read this, it's the secret to transform your life. I don't even remember what the secret was, which goes to show it couldn't have been that important. Paul tells us in Philippians 4 that he has a secret. Do you know it? He says, I have learned the secret, he says. And it's not self-fulfillment, it's not you do you, and it's not only buy things that bring you joy. It is, he says, I have learned to be content in every circumstance. He says, I've had a lot, I've had a little, right? This is something that a monk in the 6th century by the name of Benedict of Nursia, called stability. Right? The secret is stability. It is you're content with what you have, content with a little, and if you get more, Solomon says, fine, great. Don't depend on it. It's a fortune. You can't control it. It's a fortune. Literally means luck. So that doesn't mean don't be diligent. It doesn't mean don't be prudent. Exercise foresight, but recognize you're not in control. That's the secret. Any closing thoughts on this before I let you go and enjoy the rest of your Sunday inside? All right. Andy, would you be willing to pray for us as we head out into the world? Amen. Thank you, Andy. All right, everyone. Great to be with you this morning. Go, stay warm, enjoy the rest of your Sunday. And if the Lord wills it, we'll be together again next week.